Welcome to This Explainer. We're going to skip the usual pleasantries today and just drop straight into a prehistoric mystery. We're going to look at how a literal biological itch inside the human brain led to, well, one of the most heartwarming alliances in the history of our planet. And the answer to how early humans actually started keeping pets, it begins in a rather unexpected place, a damp, dimly lit cave.
Picture this for a second. It's 30,000 years ago. A torrential rainstorm has been raging outside for 3 solid days. Imagine you are this restless, spiky-haired human ancestor pacing around in your orange animal hide tunic. You've already eaten your foraged berries, you've napped your flint spearhead, you've meticulously picked the dirt out from under your fingernails, and now, you are just staring blankly at the rough limestone wall in front of you. You are undeniably bored out of your mind.
But wait a second, is that even possible? Did ancient humans actually experience boredom the way we do? We tend to picture the lives of our ancestors as this constant, adrenaline-fueled struggle for survival, chasing down massive mammoths, outrunning saber-toothed cats, just battling the elements every single second. But the truth? There was actually a massive amount of downtime. When the weather trapped your tribe in a cave, or winter brought long, dark nights, there were hours and days with absolutely nothing to do. So what did they do?
So the crucial point here is that boredom isn't just some modern curse born out of the smartphone era. It is a deeply ingrained evolutionary mechanism. Think of it like a neurological alarm clock. When you're doing nothing, your brain drops its dopamine levels, which creates this feeling of mild distress. And honestly, this was evolutionary gold. Because if our ancestors just sat around feeling perfectly content doing absolutely nothing, they wouldn't innovate, they wouldn't explore, and they definitely wouldn't invent. Boredom was the biological push that whispered, hey, do something. Improve your situation.
And that biological itch, it forced our ancestors to tinker inside that cave, effectively turning them into the very first artists, storytellers, and gamers. They started mixing red ochre with animal fat and doodling hand stencils on the walls, the ancient equivalent of saying, I was here. Around the campfire, they passed the time by inventing myths and sharing gossip. They even created games. Archaeologists have dug up sheep knuckle bones, known as astrogally, used as the very first dice. They even found patterned pits dug into the dirt to play early strategy games, kind of like Mancala.
But to really grasp the sheer scale of this ancient idle time, just consider this staggering number, 40,000. That is how many years ago humans decided to carve the very first musical instrument. And they didn't do it out of some vital need for survival. Nope, they did it out of sheer, unadulterated idle time.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how wild that downtime was. I mean, imagine the absurd amount of effort required for our bored ancestor to stumble upon a dead griffin vulture, snap its hollow wing bone, hollow it out completely, and then carefully drill 5 perfectly spaced holes into it, just to realize that blowing through it makes a musical scale. It's absolutely astonishing. Our ancestors literally cured their boredom with art and music.
So, boredom successfully cured the inside of the cave. But what happened when this evolutionary itch pushed them to look outside? Eventually, the rain stops, the sun comes out, and our restless stickman ancestor steps out of the cave. They've innovated their tools, their games, their art. But out there, in the harsh Ice Age environment, there are other creatures. Some are prey, some are predators. And it's here that human curiosity, driven by that exact same need for stimulation, sparked a completely new kind of interaction.
Okay, let's dive into this because there is a massive distinction we need to make here. Early humans absolutely realized they could capture and tame certain animals to help them survive. These were hunting partners, highly functional, utility-driven relationships where an animal was kept to track prey, carry heavy loads, or give an early warning of danger. But that is very different from a true pet. A true pet is an animal kept purely for companionship, affection, and emotional bonding. So, how exactly did a wild, dangerous Ice Age predator become a true pet?
Enter the wolf theory and this fascinating concept of self-domestication. For a long time, people thought humans aggressively captured wolf pups and trained them. But modern science suggests something entirely different. The theory actually goes that friendlier, less aggressive wolves naturally approached human camps, drawn by the smell of leftover food. Picture our bored ancestors sitting by the fire, tossing a leftover bone to a cautious but curious wolf. The wolves that were less fearful got more food, survived longer, and reproduced. Over generations, these wolves effectively domesticated themselves, becoming significantly less aggressive and way more dog-like.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because this bond certainly didn't happen overnight. Looking at the archaeological record, the evidence for a deep human-animal bond becomes pretty undeniable. Over 14,000 years ago, the Bon Oberkastel dog was formally buried alongside humans, and roughly 12,000 years ago, in a Natufian settlement, an elderly human was buried with their hand lovingly resting on a puppy. This wasn't just tossing a carcass in a ditch, guys. These were formal, careful, intentional burials.
Which brings us to a major scientific debate. Looking at those burials, anthropologists had to ask a tough question. Were these early dogs actually pets, or were they just highly valued hunting tools? I mean, you might bury a prize spear with a warrior, right? So perhaps the dog was just a piece of primitive technology that belonged to the deceased. For a long time, it was really difficult to prove that prehistoric humans felt genuine emotional love for these animals. Until, that is, we looked at the biology.
This brings us to a remarkable chemical, oxytocin. Often called the love hormone, oxytocin is the exact same hormone that surges in a mother's brain when she looks at her newborn baby. It is heavily associated with bonding, empathy, and building trust in mammals. It is quite literally the biological foundation of love and connection. And it's the exact key that separates a functional hunting tool from man's very first good boy. Now, what's really interesting here is what happens on a chemical level. When a human looks at a dog, and that dog looks back, something magical happens. In both the human and the dog's brain, there is a sudden surge of oxytocin. The human feels affection, the dog feels affection. An evolutionary feedback loop is instantly born. Dogs are actually the only non-primate animals that seek out human eye contact in this way. They essentially hijacked our biological bonding system, proving that the connection wasn't just functional, it was literally, chemically, love.
And once that biological door was opened, humans didn't stop at wolves. This urge for companionship extended far beyond the campfire. Archaeologists have discovered human burials and evidence of emotional bonds involving a really surprising variety of animals. Ancient cats, tamed foxes, birds, and even monkeys have been found in contexts that strongly suggest they were cherished companions, not just livestock or pest control. Our capacity to form cross-species friendships simply became a defining trait of humanity.
So let's bring it all together. What started as an agitated, dopamine-deprived hominid staring at a cave wall evolved into something profound. Boredom pushed us to innovate, to create art, to tell stories, and to look outside ourselves. When we finally met that friendly wolf by the fire, it wasn't just about surviving the harsh ice siege anymore. This evolutionary itch for connection and stimulation fundamentally changed how human civilization developed. We brought animals into our homes, our families, and our hearts, permanently altering both their evolutionary path and our own.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. We still have that exact same neurological alarm clock ticking inside our heads today. That same dopamine drop our ancestor felt in the cave is the exact feeling you get sitting in a waiting room or waiting for a train. So, next time you feel bored, will you just reach into your pocket to doom scroll on your smartphone? Or will you harness that prehistoric itch, invent the next big thing, and go pet a dog? The choice is yours. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.